Hi everyone and welcome to my channel and to this time-lapse version of a Bichon Frisé called Artie in soft pastel. I hope that you enjoy this speedy version here. I will be releasing a really full, in-depth tutorial series from this, all about painting those complicated white curls. But as always, if you enjoy this here, then please do hit that subscribe button. Artie's portrait is on the new Canson velvet paper, so I'm still experimenting with this paper, but I liked it enough to have a go at this portrait on it. I thought it would be just perfect for this with a combination of some landscape techniques and, of course, that lovely little pooch in the middle. So a cracking photo reference from my client this time. I can see so much detail in Artie. It's nice and brightly lit. Although something that I'm going to talk about in the longer tutorial series is how the lighting can really affect a portrait, especially a white dog with curly fur. Curly fur is definitely one of the trickier things to paint. And in my opinion, white curls might just be the trickiest. So I was delighted to see this photo of Artie, knowing that it would make a really good full-length tutorial series going into a lot of depth and a lot of detail on how I create this effect. Because a lot of the time I'm striving for realism, but at the same time I'm trying to avoid having to paint absolutely every single individual hair on the dog. And that's often my technique. What I'm going for, especially with curly fur, are more the clumps of hair rather than each individual hair. And in choosing the right colours, creating lots of contrast down at the roots of the hairs, that's what really gives it the 3D impression. So colour choices are incredibly important in this type of portrait, and that's something that I'll go into a lot of detail on in the longer series. So I'm using mostly my Unison soft pastels, and with just a few Terry Ludwigs thrown in as well. Very little pastel pencil in this piece actually. Just some details around the eyes, as you can see here. Eyes, nose and mouth tend to get helped out by the pastel pencils. But for most of the dog, I'm really relying on the lovely thick, chunky marks that I can get from the sticks. So as I said, I'm not really trying to paint each individual hair. So there are many different styles that you can work in, and one of them is where you try and replicate each and every little hair that you can see. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There are many wonderful, detailed pet portrait artists out there. And while I strive for detail as well, it's a different type of detail, I think. I'm somewhere in between detailed and more painterly. And I feel like the soft pastel sticks are the perfect medium for this. So I was delighted to be asked to paint little Artie. He's sadly missed by his family, and so this portrait will really mean the world to them, and that's some of my favourite jobs to take on when you know that the artwork is going to mean so much to someone. So the pressure was definitely on in this one. I really wanted to capture Artie just how he is. I'm familiar with the breed. In fact, I've painted quite a few of the Bichon Frisé before. In fact, A couple of times before, I've painted a pair of them together. But Artie doesn't just look like every other Bichon Frisé. And that's often the case. I've got to look harder and try to really see the character of the little dog that I'm painting, not just produce something in general of that breed, but I'm really looking for his character, especially around the eyes, of course. But there's so much in the body language and the facial expressions of a portrait that mean you can make it look just like them. There are times that I'm painting many breeds that I've painted before, but you can always find the character in a particular dog's photo. Of course, it helped this time that Artie's photograph was really clear. I could zoom right in and get lots of detail. I also love the pose. He's just perched up on that rock in the foreground, looking extremely perky. So I decided to remove the lead that's coming down his front just to simplify a little bit, and of course to show some more of his curls at the front. But I did include the collar, and you can see lots of darker shadow tones going in around the chin and down the front of the chest, especially where we're getting more shadows. But the tricky thing about painting Artie is that there aren't that many strong shadows on him. So we don't have bright sunlight that's casting very definite shadows across the dog, because that sometimes makes the task easier. Instead, we've got this almost flat, bright light. And I definitely think that is in my very top items that are difficult to paint. So in the full length tutorial, I will talk a lot about the color choices that went into this. And then, of course, because I was working on a different paper, I've got a lot to chat about there too. The Canson Velvet performed really nicely for this. If you haven't seen this paper before, I've got a longer review video of it here on my YouTube channel. And I think this is about my 4th painting on it now. It's not exactly like any other paper that I've tried, but it's somewhere in the middle of Hahnemuhl Velour and Clairefontaine Pastel Matte, which are my 2 favourite pastel papers. So I'm still finding my way a little bit on this paper, but I feel like it was a good choice for this portrait. So as I continue to work on down the body of the dog, I also take little breaks and work on some of the background elements as I go. This piece took me quite a long time. There's a lot going on here. We've got a bit of background stuff happening. And then, as I mentioned, probably the most laborious type of fur to paint. And not just his little face, but he's got those curls right over his body too, so it took a while. But I'm always amazed with just how much colour you can find in any white subject. You've almost got to tell your brain to forget that it's a white dog that you're painting and just look at the colours that you're actually seeing. In actual fact, there's not that much pure white that went into Artie. Instead, it's lots of light tints, and you can see warm colours, yellowy, peachy, light tints, and then also cooler colours from very pale lilacs right through to pale blues. So I think I used about every light tint I've got on this body. And then, of course, in some of the darker shadows, we've actually got darker browns, deeper blue violets. So always a surprising amount of colour in anything white, because of course a white object can reflect all of the colours happening around. So we get a lot of blue tones probably coming from the sky, and I actually go back up through the face at one point and add some more blue tones up the side of the face. So as I continued down the body of the dog, I would go back and make little adjustments to the rest of the dog too. So constantly comparing the colours, getting a bit more done, and then seeing how everything balances. But finally reaching the bottom of the painting, it felt nice to complete all of the curls. And we've got this lovely big bit of rock that he's standing on. I didn't want to go too crazy on the detail in the rock. What I really wanted was to keep our attention just on little Artie. And so I decided to keep the rocks a little bit darker than they are in the photo reference, to not add quite as much of the lighter coloured lichen that's on the rocks, just to keep it more of a darker tonal value here at the bottom. And you can see I'm also being quite loose with the rock, just using the texture of the paper to help hint at the rough texture of the rocks. So little bits of my landscape paintings creeping into my pet portraits. And the final thing to go on is my signature. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching this full-length tutorial series coming very soon on my Patreon channel. I'll add links in my description below. But if you did enjoy this here, then please do subscribe to me on YouTube. Thanks very much for watching. And until next time, happy pasteling.